The air hung heavy with the scent of dried herbs and the faint, smoky tang of extinguished candles. Elias Marrow sat across from the elder, his eyes fixed on the wizened face etched with centuries of village history and sorrow. The old man's voice was a gravelly whisper, threading the room with stories long buried beneath years of silence. Glimmer Hollow wasn't always this quiet, Harbin began, his gnarled fingers tracing a worn map spread across the table. It was a place of light and life before the moon's shadow touched it. But the ancestors, they made a pact, wittingly inviting the curse that festers beneath the water's surface. Elias's eyes narrowed. He had heard fragments before, yet each telling deepened the chill in his bones. The curse, it's not over. Harbin shook his head slowly, his clouded eyes meeting Elias's with a weight that crushed hope. No, lad. The curse is cyclical, tied to the moon's descent and the lake's hunger. It ebbs and flows like the tides, waiting for the next time the moon sinks too low, the next generation to be ensnared. Elias swallowed hard, the room suddenly too small, the air thick with impending doom. Then what can we do? How do we stop it? The old man's gaze softened. Knowledge is our shield, but the price is steep. To face the curse, you must confront more than just the entities, the darkness within us all. Later, Elias found himself standing alone by the lake as dusk bled into night. The sky was a bruised canvas of purple and indigo, the first stars winking faintly above the encroaching darkness. The moon hung low, fractured and shimmering on the water's surface like a fractured mirror. His breath formed small clouds in the chill air, each exhale a ghost of memories past. He thought of Jonas, lost to the reflection, of Mara, fighting desperately against the invisible tide pulling her brother deeper into madness. But beneath the grief was a gnawing fear, his own mind fraying under the relentless pull of the lunar madness. Images flickered behind his eyes. The night his wife was taken, the silence that followed, the voices whispering in the dark. A shiver ran down his spine as a sudden wind swept through the village streets, carrying with it faint murmurs, unintelligible yet heavy with warning. Shadows stretched long and twisting like fingers reaching for him. Elias's heart hammered, the unease coiling tighter within his chest. He quickened his pace, the quiet streets suddenly alien and threatening. Back in his cabin, Elias sat hunched over a cluttered table, candlelight flickering against the walls lined with maps, old diaries, and brittle documents. His fingers trembled slightly as he traced the lineage of the curse, the names of those lost to the lake, the cycles of madness recorded in faded ink. The weight of history pressed down on him, yet beneath the fear was a burning resolve. He would not let Glimmerhollow fall into oblivion. Not again. The night deepened, and with it, the whispers of the past grew louder. Elias knew the road ahead was fraught with peril, both from the lunar entity that haunted the lake and the shadows within himself. But as the candle guttered and the moon cast its fractured light through the window, he steeled himself for the fight to come. The curse might be eternal, but so was his determination. And in the gathering darkness, that was all that stood between the village and the creeping void. The lake whispers in the night, and the moon watches silently, waiting. The once vibrant village now bore the marks of its torment, shattered windows, splintered boats, and the hollow silence of loss. Yet, amid the ruin, the first stirrings of life returned. Villagers emerged from their homes, faces drawn but resolute, their eyes searching the horizon as if willing the sun to rise higher, to bring with it a new beginning. Elias Marrow stood at the heart of the gathering crowd, his lean frame silhouetted against the mist that curled over the water. His graying hair was tousled from restless sleep. Deep lines etched into his weathered face. A map of grief, determination, and something fragile yet fiercely alive, hope. Beside him, Mara Lawn moved with purpose. Her dark hair pulled back, green eyes alight with a fire that belied the exhaustion clinging to her features. Together, they had become the reluctant pillars of a village desperately clinging to survival. "We'll start here," Elias said quietly, gesturing toward the small cluster of homes nearest the lake. "The docks need rebuilding, and those boats won't fix themselves." Mara nodded, her voice steady. Old Man Harbin's journals mentioned ways to ward off the moon's influence. We can incorporate those rituals into our daily lives. It won't undo what's happened, but it can protect us moving forward. The villagers listened, some skeptical, others desperate for direction. Sheriff Caltain stood apart, arms crossed over his broad chest. His gruff demeanor softened by the visible relief that the terror had at least subsided. He stepped forward, voice firm but not unkind. "We keep order, we keep watch. No more disappearances, no more madness." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The village was fragile, but it was not broken. Work began with a rhythm born of necessity. Hands that had trembled in fear now gripped hammers and saws, mending shattered doors and patching holes in weather-beaten walls. Children played quietly nearby, their laughter tentative but healing, washing away some of the darkness that had seeped into every corner of Glimmer Hollow. As the sun climbed, Elias and Mara retreated to the old town hall, a modest building that had weathered centuries. Inside, maps and tattered manuscripts lined the walls, relics of knowledge that might yet save them. They spread out the gathered texts, poring over symbols and incantations, tracing the threads of ancient curses and forgotten rites. "The key," Mara whispered, "is balance between the moon's pull and the lake's depths. We need to reconnect the village to the natural order, to remind the lunar entity that we belong here, not it." Elias's eyes narrowed, his mind racing through memories of the battles fought beneath the moon's sickly glow. "And if it resists? If it comes back? Then we'll face it again," Mara said, placing a steady hand on his arm. Together, outside, the wind stirred the surface of the lake, ripples catching the light like shards of glass. Sheriff Caltain entered quietly, nodding toward the maps. "I'm done denying it," he said gruffly. "Whatever that was, it's real. And if you're going to fight it, I'll stand with you." A rare smile flickered on Elias's lips. "We'll need all the help we can get." Days turned into weeks. The village slowly reclaimed its spirit. Fires were rekindled, gardens replanted, and the old protective rituals wove themselves into daily life. Salt lines at doorways, moonlit prayers whispered on the wind, and herbs burned to cleanse the night air. The scars remained, but so did the strength to endure. One evening, as the sky faded from twilight to deep indigo, Elias found himself drawn once more to the lake's edge. The moon hung low, a pale sentinel casting its silvery gleam across the water, beautiful, haunting, and inscrutable. He watched the shimmering reflection ripple gently, the lake calm but alive with unseen currents. His breath caught in his throat as a chill slid down his spine. The lunar entity might have been subdued, but it was not gone. It lingered in the shadows, waiting, watching. Elias closed his eyes, the cool night air filling his lungs. He thought of the lives lost, the battles fought, and the fragile hope blossoming within the village. He would stand guard, a sentinel in turn, watching over Glimmer Hollow as the new dawn rose. Because some darkness never fully fades, but neither does the light, willing to face it. And so the moon rose again, pale and watchful, as the village below breathed, healed, and prepared for whatever might come next. He stood at the edge of Glimmerhollow's shore, where the water met the earth in a seamless embrace, and the moon, pale and swollen, hung low in the sky, refusing to relinquish its hold on the night. Despite the fading darkness, the moon's surface shimmered with a strange vitality, the ripples across its face suggesting a restless heartbeat beneath its luminous crust. Ilyase's eyes, deep-set and shadowed with years of sleepless nights, traced the subtle movements of the celestial orb. A faint unease stirred within him, not the raw terror of days past, but a cold, creeping uncertainty that whispered of unfinished business. The lake was calm, but its glassy surface betrayed an unnatural tension, as if the water itself held its breath, waiting for an inevitable return. Behind him, footsteps crunched softly on the frost-kissed grass, and Mara Lawn's familiar silhouette emerged from the mist. She carried an old, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed and brittle, a relic from the village's past. Her green eyes, sharp and piercing, met his gaze with a mixture of determination and apprehension. "Elias," she said quietly, the wind tugging strands of dark hair across her face, "I found something in the Elders' records. There's mention of the moon's cycles, how it descends and returns, bringing with it a shadow that never fully leaves. They called it the Watcher in the sky." Elias took the journal, fingers trembling slightly as he flipped through the cryptic notes and faded illustrations. The villagers' ancestors had known of this curse, of a darkness tied to the moon's descent that fed on fear and fractured sanity. A sudden chill swept across the lake, a breath colder than the dawn air, stirring the surface into trembling waves. For a fleeting heartbeat, the moon's reflection shattered like fractured glass, casting a mosaic of grotesque, distorted faces upon the water, faces twisted in silent screams, eyes hollow and accusing. Elias's breath hitched. He blinked, and the faces were gone, replaced by the placid reflection of the sky, serene and deceptive. Mara's hand tightened on the journal, her knuckles white. "It's not over," she whispered. "It never really is." They stood side by side, the first pale light of day spilling over the horizon, washing the village in fragile gold. The moon lingered stubbornly, a silent sentinel watching from the retreating night. Elias met Mara's gaze, a shared understanding passing between them. The battle for Glimmerhollow's soul had left scars deeper than the eye could see, and though the terror had receded, it had not vanished. Somewhere in the shifting boundary between sky and water, the lunar entity waited, patient and hungry. "We'll be ready," Elias said, voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Whatever comes." Mara nodded, a fierce light igniting in her eyes. Together, they turned from the lake, their silhouettes etched against the waking sky. Guardians of a village perched precariously on the edge of nightmare and dawn. But as the sun rose, casting long shadows over Glimmerhollow, the moon's pale glow did not fade entirely. It clung stubbornly to the heavens, like a watcher that never sleeps. A reminder that some darknesses are eternal and some evils merely bide their time. And so, beneath the fading stars and the burgeoning light, the watcher in the sky remained silent, inscrutable, and waiting. It hung heavy, thick with the weight of unspoken fears and memories too raw to forget. For weeks, the moon had begun to rise again, its familiar silver face climbing slowly back into the night sky. Yet something fundamental had shifted beneath the surface. The lake no longer shimmered with benign light. Instead, it held a restless energy, as if the water itself remembered what had transpired. And the darkness beneath, was not yet done with its silent hunger. Elias Morrow stood on the shoreline just before dawn, the cold biting through his worn coat. His eyes were fixed on the lake's still surface, where faint flickers of unnatural silver glowed beneath the waning moonlight. It was an unsettling sight. The water whispered in strange rhythms, carrying sounds that were almost like voices, soft, urgent, and distant. He shivered, not entirely from the chill. The memories of what they had fought to survive clawed at his mind, refusing to let him forget the depths of horror that had nearly swallowed them all. Behind him, the village was slowly stirring. Windows glowed with the dim light of oil lamps, and the faint murmur of cautious voices drifted through the crisp air. Mara Lawn was already up, too. He knew she had been restless, her sharp green eyes reflecting the same unease that haunted him. They had faced down the lunar entity together, fought against a terror that defied reason, but the victory felt incomplete, as if the true battle was only just beginning. Inside the village hall, a tense gathering was underway. Sheriff Caltain, his gruff demeanor softened by exhaustion, debated quietly with Mara. Their voices barely rose above a whisper, but the intensity was palpable. Reports of strange sightings had surfaced against shadows slipping beneath cabin walls, reflections in windows warping and twisting into unnatural shapes. The villagers listened with pale faces, their eyes wide and haunted, caught between hope and fear. "We can't ignore these signs," Mara insisted, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. "The entity may be weakened, but it's not gone. It never truly leaves." Calton rubbed his stubbled chin thoughtfully. "I want to believe that, Mara, but the people need peace. We can't let this fear control us. We have to move forward. But at what cost?" She countered. "Will we be ready when it returns? Or will we be caught unprepared, like before?" The room fell silent, the weight of uncertainty pressing on every soul present. In a quieter corner of the village, Old Man Harbin sat surrounded by a small group of villagers eager for answers. His voice was a trembling but commanding thread weaving through the dim light cast by a flickering candle. He spoke of the ancient curse that had haunted Glimmerhollow for generations, the cyclical nature of the lunar madness that rose and receded like tides, leaving scars in its wake. "Remember this," he cautioned. "The moon's descent is never truly over. It waits, biding its time beneath the waves and shadows, until the village forgets its pain and lets its guard down. Then it will rise again, hungry and relentless." His words settled like a cold shadow over the listeners, stirring a haunted reverence that mingled with their lingering dread. Night deepened once more, and Elias found himself unable to rest. Drawn back to the lake, he stood alone beneath the ink-black sky. The surface was calm, yet alive with subtle movements. Then, in the flickering light, he caught it, a fleeting, shifting figure in the lake's reflection. It mirrored his own form for a heartbeat before dissolving into ripples that spread like whispered warnings across the water. His breath caught in his throat, a cold dread settling deep within his bones. Was this a sign that the entity still lingered, or merely the torment of a mind fraying at the edges? He clenched his fists, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. There was no retreat from this place, no forgetting the darkness that had claimed so many. The village, and perhaps his very soul, was tethered to the fate of that lunar shadow. As dawn broke, casting a pale glow over Glimmerhollow, the villagers awoke to a fragile peace. Yet beneath that fragile calm, the shadows stirred, whispering of a terror not fully vanquished. Elias and Mara exchanged a look heavy with shared understanding. They would remain vigilant, guardians against the lingering shadows that threatened to consume their home once more. The moon had risen again, but its light was cold and distant, an ambiguous beacon in the fading sky. The nightmare had ended, yet the story was far from over, and the true nature of the terror still hung in the balance, waiting for the moment when it would once again reach out from the depths to claim what was lost. And somewhere beneath the tranquil surface of the lake, the lunar entity watched and waited. The moon, now hanging impossibly low, cast a sickly luminescence that shimmered across the water's surface like liquid silver, distorted and alive. Elias's boots sank slightly into the damp earth as he stepped closer, his gaze fixed on the undulating reflection. The village lay behind him, dark and silent, every shadow seeming to stretch and twist like a living thing. For a long moment, Elias simply stood, the cold wind tugging at his graying hair, carrying whispers that might have been the lake's breath or the echoes of lost souls. Memories clung to him like a shrewd Jonas's smile, Mara's desperate pleas, Sheriff Caltain's reluctant acceptance. The weight of all they had endured pressed down, yet Elias knew this moment was not an end but a fragile pause. From the shadows, a soft footfall broke the silence. Mara Lorne emerged, her dark hair catching the faint moonlight, eyes wide and searching. "It's still there," she murmured, voice trembling yet steady. "The reflection, it's not gone, it waits." Elias nodded, his gaze never leaving the water. "It's hungry," he said quietly, "and it remembers." Together they watched as the lake's surface rippled unnaturally. Faces flickered within the reflection, twisted, silent, pleading. The lunar entity's essence pulsed faintly beneath the water, a living nightmare bound to the moon's descent. The air vibrated with a low, haunting hum that seemed to seep into their very bones. Suddenly, Sheriff Caltain appeared, his usual gruff demeanor softened by the weight of understanding. "We can't let this happen again," he said firmly. "Not to us, not to anyone." Elias met his gaze, a shared resolve passing between them. The battle had taken so much friends, sanity, hope, but the fight was not over. As the moon's reflection shimmered and the night deepened, they stood united at the edge of the abyss, guardians against a terror that might never fully vanish. The lake was silent again, but the darkness beyond whispered a warning. The moon might eat the lake, but the lake would remember, and so would they. The night held its breath, waiting for what would come next. A cold mist began to curl over the water, wrapping the village in a spectral cloak. Elias's fingers brushed the surface of the lake, feeling the pulse beneath the heartbeat of something ancient and unyielding. His mind wrestled with the visions and voices that had haunted his nights, the faces of those lost to the reflection's embrace. "Do you think it's truly gone?" Mara's voice was barely a whisper. "No," Elias replied. "It's waiting, patient." The moon's glow flickered, and for a moment, the horizon seemed to bend, the sky blending with the water in an endless expanse of silver and shadow. The village behind them was quiet but restless, the scars of the ordeal etched into every home and heart. Sheriff Caltain lit a lantern, its warm glow a fragile beacon against the encroaching darkness. "We'll watch," he said, "and we'll be ready." Elias exhaled slowly, the cold air burning his lungs. "This place is our home," he said. "No matter what comes, we hold on." As the first light of dawn threatened the horizon, the three stood sentinel eyes fixed on the lake that had swallowed so much. The moon, now a pale distant orb, seemed to retreat yet. Its reflection lingered, a ghostly promise that the story was not finished. In the depths below, something stirred, and the moon waited to eat the lake again. Elias turned away from the water's edge, the weight of his vigil settling deep in his bones. He knew the village would never be the same. The line between reality and nightmare had blurred, leaving behind a world where shadows breathed and the sky wept silver tears. But as long as he stood, as long as Mara and Kaltain stood with him, there was hope, a fragile thread woven through the darkness. And in the fading glow of the moon, that thread was all they had. The end was uncertain, the terror unresolved, but the fight endured. And so did Glimmerhall. The moon might eat the lake, but the village would not be swallowed whole. The night whispered of ancient curses, of souls lost and found, of madness and memory, and beneath the fading sky, Elias Marrow, haunted and determined, watched and waited, ready for whatever shadows the dawn would bring.